Unleash the power of knowledge and connect with the heartbeat of the African diaspora. Download our African Diaspora News Channel app now on Google Play and Apple App Store. Stay informed with authentic and diverse perspectives, breaking news, and cultural insights. Immerse yourself in a community that celebrates unity, resilience, and progress. Experience the vibrancy of the diaspora at your fingertips. Don't miss out. Empower your perspective today. Search African Diaspora News Channel and join the conversation.
Do you trust the British police?
I do. But remember my experience with the police in Nigeria was very negative. And coming to the UK, my first experience with the police was very positive. The police in Nigeria would rob us. So when people say, "Oh, I had this bad experience with the police because I'm black and they're white," I was like, "Well, I remember the police stole my brother's shoes and his watch."
His shoes?
Yeah, they took his shoes and his watch. It's a very poor country, so people do all sorts of things, and giving people a gun is just a license to intimidate. But that's not the bar we should use for British police. Obviously, it should be much higher. But my experience was so positive. When I was burgled, for example, the police were there, very helpful. They eventually caught the person. This is 2004, so 20 years ago. The police did catch criminals, and now we've given them too much to do, in my view. So the police are the first line of defense for everything, and I think that burden makes it a lot harder for them to actually do the basics, and that's another thing that we need to look at.
I'm here to talk about why Nigerians are angry with her. With all the things that she said, was she lying? Why are people angry at her? If this is your first time hearing Kemi Badenoch's name, here's a quick backstory. So Kemi Badenoch is a black British woman of Nigerian descent. She's born to Nigerian parents. She was born in the UK, went to Nigeria, and at age 16 moved back to the UK due to the deteriorating conditions of the economy in Nigeria and the insecurity as well. But why are Nigerians so angry at what she said? Now, Kemi Badenoch has been quite vocal about Nigeria, not in the way that Nigerians expected her to be vocal about Nigeria. She described Nigeria as corrupt, unsafe, riddled with issues that undermine Nigeria's progress. And let's be honest, many of the things that she said aren't lies. We're here to be honest, right? But the backlash she's received from Nigerians has been so intense. Let's take a look at some of the things that she said.
I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you, Roxy. Lagos was a place where almost everything seemed broken. I grew up under a military dictatorship, and I would never have believed that 40 years later, I would be standing here as the leader of the world's most successful political party in the history of Western democracy. I was lucky in my experiences. I was born to a relatively wealthy family and had a decent education. But I also know what it is like to be poor. I watched my family become poor as their wealth, income, and savings were inflated away by destructive government policies. But they didn't call it socialism, but it definitely was. Capital controls, no freedom of movement, government owning the means of production. And there was no freedom either. The government decided which school your child went to. It decided which businesses could or could not operate, all the way to arrests with no trial and state-sanctioned murder. So I know what freedom looks like. It's what I had in the UK. I know the values that can make citizens wealthier and happier, and how without them, they become engines of misery and despair. Classic liberal values, not left-wing liberalism, but classic liberalism of free markets, free speech, free enterprise, freedom of religion, the presumption of innocence and trusted institutions within the rule of law, and equality under the law, no matter who you are or where you come from. All of those things were missing when I was growing up as a child. So I know their value, and I know that in the West, we may be losing what made our countries great. I was born here, but I grew up in a place where fear was everywhere. You cannot understand it unless you've lived it. Triple checking that all the doors and windows are locked, waking up in the night at every sound, listening as you hear your neighbors scream as they are being burgled and beaten, and wondering if your home will be next.
Did she lie? Nope. Did she tell the truth? Yeah, So why are Nigerians so angry at her? Nigerians are not angry at the truth because it is the truth. Nigerians are angry at how she told the truth and who she's telling the truth to. So Nigerians have started calling her Uncle Tom. Now, before we get into more about her specific comments, let's take a moment to actually explain what this Uncle Tom theory is. Now, if you are in the US, you probably already know this. If you're not in the US and you've never really heard this, the term Uncle Tom originates from Harriet Beecher Stowe's 1852 novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Now, the character Uncle Tom is a black slave who is loyal and submissive to his white masters, often at the expense of his fellow slaves. Over time, right? This Uncle Tom became a term used to describe a black person who is perceived as, betraying their race by aligning too closely with the white people or systems of oppression. And that's why they're calling her an Uncle Tom. Now, in modern context, calling someone an Uncle Tom doesn't necessarily mean they are submissive. It can also mean that they're seen as being so critical of their own race or their own heritage in a way that appears to pander to those in power, often white-dominated systems. It's about being perceived as a sellout, someone who distances themselves from their own people to curry favor or to fit into a different mold. So how does this relate to Kemi Badenoch? Let's start with her background. Kemi was born in London to Nigerian parents, spent part of her childhood in Lagos, and then later on moved back to the UK at the age of 16. Now, we also know that she's risen to an incredibly powerful position as the leader of the Conservative Party in the UK, and she has become a significant figure in British politics. But here's where things actually get so complicated, right? In several interviews and speeches, she hasn't shied away from calling out Nigeria's flaws that are very glaring, flaws that we know about. She's spoken so openly about corruption, the lack of safety, issues of poor governance, and the list goes on and on and on. And to be very fair, there are valid points that she's made and valid criticisms. But Nigerians themselves even complain about these things daily. You can see that across social media. However, the issue is how she says it and the platform that she's using to say it. Many Nigerians feel that as someone with Nigerian roots, Kemi should be more balanced in her critique.
I chose this country because here I could breathe free and I could be everything that I wanted to be. I grew up in Nigeria and I saw firsthand what happens when politicians are in it for themselves, when they use public money as their private piggy banks, when they promise the earth and pollute not just the air but the whole political atmosphere with their failure to serve others. I saw what socialism means for millions. It's poverty and broken dreams. I came to Britain determined to make my way in a country where hard work and honest endeavour can take you anywhere.
They're arguing that by consistently highlighting the negatives about Nigeria on such a global platform, she is demarketing the country. Now, this word has become a buzzword recently, demarketing Nigeria. And because of that, she's reinforcing harmful stereotypes and just making things harder for Nigerians abroad who already face prejudice. Now, it's one thing to acknowledge the flaws of your country, but when your tone seems detached or even dismissive, it starts to feel like betrayal. This is what Nigerians are saying. And this is where the Uncle Tom theory actually comes into play. Nigerians see Kemi's comments as a way of distancing herself from the heritage and aligning with a Western narrative that often paints Africa in such a poor light. And Nigerians, frankly speaking, are tired of it. They're essentially asking, whose side are you on? Is she speaking as someone who wants to help Nigeria improve, having her roots from Nigeria, or as someone who has no ties to Nigeria at all and she just wants to discredit it? Listen, I'm sure Kemi has made herself very clear. She's representing the UK, not Nigeria. But why are Nigerians so angry? Now let's get into why Nigerians are angry. I'm going to break it down to you. Representation matters.
We should be deporting people more than we are now, even as we are in the ECHR.
So imagine this Nigerian sellout lady talking about how they want to deport immigrants from the United Kingdom. She's betraying the system that helped her. She herself, she's immigrant. She came to that United Kingdom when she was about 17 or 16 years with student visa. She overstayed even when the visa expired. She tried all her possible best to have a job there, started working McDonald's. Then she got the document. After some years, she became a United Kingdom citizen. And now she's talking about she wants to deport people.
Nigerians expect someone like Kemi, who has risen to such heights, to be a positive representative of her roots, Nigeria, whether she likes it or not. Her Nigerian heritage is part of her identity. Nigeria is in her blood. And when she criticizes Nigeria so openly, without balancing it with constructive input or even acknowledgement of its positives, it feels like she's just rejecting her roots, and Nigerians are not having it. The second thing is reinforcing negative perceptions. There's already a global perception of Nigeria, and I'm sure you already know about it. They say that Nigeria is a country rife with corruption and chaos. Now, when someone with Kemi's influence reinforces those narratives, it gives more weight to those stereotypes, and Nigerians abroad actually worry that this could further damage the reputation of Nigeria and her citizens. The third thing is the bigger question of intent. Nigerians are also questioning, why is she so vocal about these issues? Is it to make her more accepted amongst her political peers in the UK? Is it a way to create distance from her heritage? Or does she genuinely believe that calling out Nigeria publicly will spark change? I actually don't think so. The lack of clarity about her intent leaves room for more interpretation, and for many Nigerians, it just feels like her words are aimed more at dissociating herself from the country than actually helping improve it. I know she's not in a position of authority within Nigeria, but she has her roots in Nigeria, so they expect her to do that.
There are few countries in the world where you can go in one generation from immigrant to parliamentarian. Michael Howard spoke of the British dream, people choosing this country because of its tolerance and its opportunity. It is a land where a girl from Nigeria can move here, age 16, be accepted as British, and have the great honour of representing Saffron Walden. Growing up in Nigeria, the view was rather different. The UK was a beacon, a shining light, a promise of a better life. Often we hear the radical reformer John Bright misquoted, that the House of Commons is the mother of all parliaments. What he actually said was that this country is the mother of all parliaments. Our political institutions may not always be held in high esteem, but I believe that politics is a mirror held up to society. Yes, it can sometimes be unedifying. Yes, we see human weakness on display, but it also embodies much that is great in our country. As Woody Allen said about sex, if it's not messy, you're not doing it right. Madam Deputy Speaker, the same is true for democracy. It is not always predictable. Its results are not always elegant. It can throw up results that no one expected, but we adjust. The British Parliament always has adjusted, and that is why it is the oldest in the world, because it takes its lead from the British people.
Let's balance this debate. Now, here's the thing. Kemi Badenoch is not necessarily wrong in her observations. Corruption, insecurity, poor governance, they are very real issues in Nigeria. We see it every day. But the question Nigerians are asking is this: does criticism without context or constructive solutions actually help anyone? What difference does it make? It just causes chaos. Now, on the flip side, Kemi supporters argue that honesty is necessary for growth. They believe that sugarcoating Nigeria's challenges will not solve anything. They also point out that Kemi has a right to speak her truth as a British politician, not a Nigerian politician, regardless of her Nigerian roots. But here's where I think the balance actually lies. There's a difference between calling out and calling in. Now, with calling out, it focuses solely on criticism, which often alienates the people that you're criticizing. Whilst calling in, on the other hand, it acknowledges flaws, but it also works to inspire solutions, to build bridges, and to invite collaboration. Nigerians might be more receptive to Kemi's words if they actually felt that she was calling them in rather than calling them out. So what do you think? Do Nigerians have a right to be upset with Kemi Badenoch for her statements, or is she just being honest about the challenges that we face as a country, Nigeria? Should someone with Nigerian roots hold back when discussing the country's flaws, or is it better to air out our dirty laundry for the world to see? And here's the big one. Do you think that the Uncle Tom theory actually applies to Kemi in this context? Is she distancing herself from Nigerian heritage to align with Western ideals, or is this criticism just what the doctor ordered? They say the more you hide the rot, it festers in the dark. So is she doing Nigeria a favor? Let's unpack this together. At the end of the day, conversations like this actually remind us of the delicate balance between identity and responsibility. You know, for someone like Kemi Badenoch, who straddles both British and Nigerian identities, the expectations are very high and the scrutiny is even higher. So I'm not surprised at the backlash. I'm not surprised by politicians, even in Nigeria, calling her out. But one thing is clear. We all want Nigeria to be better, whether we are speaking from within the country or as part of its diaspora. And you listening and watching might be in the diaspora. The question is, how do we strike a balance between honesty and loyalty, between criticism and hope? Thank you for being a part of today's discussion. Check out my TikTok at Ify_I. I am Ify Igwe reporting from Nigeria, and this is the African Diaspora News Channel. Don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe for more. What are your thoughts?